All right, this next section of the lesson, they make the point of editing on the fly, which means Pro Tools allows you to edit when you're in playback. You can, these are just some of the things you can do when the tracks are playing back. You can select audio or MIDI using the selector or grabber tools. You can adjust the edit selection in and out points. You can capture, separate, loop, and trim clips. I'm not gonna, you can pause the movie and read some of these, but the point is that you can do a lot of stuff while the track is playing back. I mean, I would frequently, let's think of an example. I'm going to put this back on waveform. Maybe we wanted to, in this duplicate, reduce the breaths. I play, boy. All right, so we hear the breaths in there. I mean, I could get my like a fader and automate some of this, but let's just look at volume. This is going to be hard because I'm on a trackpad instead of a mouse, but let's see what we can do here. I'm just going to do that, and I would, there's a shortcut there. If I hold down Option Command, it'll snap to the previous level of the previous breakpoint. So we know that this is probably the next breath. So I play boy, I play for you, and 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 I play boy, I play for you. I play boy. I play, we can put in fades. We can even, rearrange clips. So there's a huge amount of things you can do while Pro Tools is actually playing, and that's what this slide is telling you. Okay? Okay, let's talk about fades, customizing fades. We can change a fade. We can change the fade curve. We can double click on the fade graphic on the track with the grabber tool to open the fades dialog box. You can also just say Command F if you wish. Change the fade length. We can use the trim tool on the end or beginning of the fade to drag with the mouse. And of course we can also delete fades by just selecting it and pressing delete. Or if we had multiple fades, we could say edit fades delete. Let's try some of these. So if I had a fade in here, notice my smart tool will create the default fade shape, and that's a preference. Set up preferences, editing, and then we can have fade in. Here's my fade in shape, my fade out shape, and my crossfade default shape. So if I want to edit this shape, of course now we can just kind of do it in the box, but I think when this lesson was written it didn't say that. So I can use my grabber tool. I'm on the smart tool, so the bottom half, grabber tool, double click on it, opens up the fade out, in this case dialog box, or I could just say Command F, and then I can choose one of the kind of the defaults, or I can just get this and start why can't I mess with it? Oh, that's interesting. Standard. Oh, I guess if I use a default, I can't change the defaults. Oh, weird. I guess that's why I always just use the standard and kind of just mess with it until I like it. Or you can option click on it and get back to the default. Okay, so once we created that, you can audition this, of course, in here. I play for you. There it is. That's the audition. I can look at different views of the waveform as well. You can zoom in, zoom out. Obviously. There's lots of choices here. To delete, we would just press the delete key. If we had several fades, let's just create several fades here. Separate that, trim it out. I want to have a fade in, and I selected all of those fades, and I went up to edit. Where is fades? Fades, delete. It'll delete my fades, but leave the clips as they were. Okay, what else was we supposed to talk? Change the, oh, we can change the fade length by just, again, having it, we need to have our trim tool, so we change the fade length, and you can see the waveform will adjust depending on what the fade is, so just in real time there. So you can kind of see what's happening, and obviously you can hear what's happening if you play it out. So we can adjust the fade length with the trim tool. We can, now we can just do this, or we can option F, or we can double click on it to get the fade box. We can choose a default shape. All of those things. This equal power and equal gain typically talk about the difference between when you're doing crossfades. So we can switch between equal power and equal gain crossfades. So equal power crossfades maintain an even level when the audio is not in phase. So if I'm going from 2 different takes, for instance, this sometimes is the best way to go. If indeed you play that back and you hear like this little boost in level, you may need to change it to equal gain. So let's see if we can see this in action. Let's go back to our, here is this. Let's go somewhere where we have a bigger change there. Maybe I'm going to go in there. About it. Well, that's just a horrible place to edit. I keep trying to use pinch on my trackpad because some programs allow you to do pinch editing. And Pro Tools, it's command brackets to zoom in and out. Let's take this. So we can change this to equal power. I didn't want to change the whole thing. I want to just change this to equal power. But that may have emphasized the B too much, so let's change that back to equal gain. So it doesn't pop up that B. So there's definitely, I usually start with equal power, but if that's a problem, then I go to equal gain. Well, you know that's not even true. My default crossfade is the equal gain. So I think this is the shape that I typically use the most. And then you can even, we don't have to link the in and out points, and we can create special shapes. They can all be different. So you can rearrange them, and you can even fade this one out while this is fading in, so you can create quite custom fade shapes as well. See if that's all we were going to talk about. Customizing crossfades. These are great for closing the gaps between different takes. So gaps can be smoothed out using a combination of trimming and crossfading. So I would trim this back out, create a crossfade, and then we don't have this silent, because silence is very noticeable. So you don't want silence. Hold Control on Mac or start on Windows while using the trim tool to trim up to another clip and stop at the boundary. Wow, I didn't know that. Let's try that. So if these were apart like that, I'm going to hold down my Control key. Yeah, look at that. I've never known that. Huh. I should take the Pro Tools class. To eliminate double breaths or similar problems, retrim the transitions. I showed you that when we were comping the track to avoid the breath, because you don't want the 2 breaths. That would be very unusual. Click and drag the crossfade and hold Command while trimming for a gapless edit. Oh, they're talking about, okay, yeah. Let me show you that. I'm gonna do this. I don't even want that shape there. Okay, so let's say, yeah, we'll go back to that one. I want to eliminate the, so typically I just use my trim tool, and if I want to trim back, I'll start, on this side, and I'll just trim it back, and I'm not creating a gap there. If I want to push it the other way, I'd start with that clip. If I want to go push, I want to start on this side and push. If I want to go back, I would start on this side and go back. Otherwise, if I did it just the opposite way, I'm going to create a gap there. The other way you can do it is if you hold down Control and Command, see how my trim tool change shapes there? It'll drag now both of them at the same time. So there's that extra trim tool mode where it trims both at the same time. Otherwise, you have to use kind of the trick of, I'm on this side, I want to go back, trim, or holding down the modifier keys and allowing you to do that trim point there. All right, the last thing, little mini thing while we're talking about editing before we move on to Beat Detective is you can use the pencil tool for waveform repair. And this is very powerful if you have a little digital pop or click. We can actually use the pencil tool to redraw the waveform, which destructively changes the audio file so that it doesn't have that little pop or click in it. And I want to emphasize that this is destructive, so use it with caution. If you're not quite sure, you can duplicate your clip first. But what I usually do is I just draw it with a pencil. If it sounds better, then I keep it. If it doesn't sound better, then I undo. So let's try that. Listen to this track here. Bow it. And you heard a pop there? Bow it. All right. I know that there's a pop there because I actually just created it before I started this video, but this does happen occasionally. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but it does happen occasionally. Maybe there's a sync problem, like a word clock problem, and the digital audio got out of sync. So what you can do is you can use the scrubber tool and find the click. Now there's a very good preference that you need to pay attention to. So preferences, operation, edit selection insertion follows scrub or shuttle. If that is turned off, that will literally drive you crazy because you'll do this. You'll find it, you'll let go, and it's not actually where you. So if I started here, the edit cursor won't be there, it'll be where it was. So I want to make sure that preference is edit insertion follows scrub or shuttle. So right there. So now I can zoom in and I can do this again. And it's obvious you can see that right now. So there's our little pop and click, and we keep zooming in. And we can take our pencil tool and we can literally draw it out. So now when we play it, still sounds like it's still there a little bit. Undo. Let's go jumbo. There's two of them in there. Let's take our pencil tool again. And draw. So I want to put a marker here. That's where the edit was. Bow it. Now it's gone. Bow it. So that's where it was. You can zoom back in. So undo. So there it is, and then there it's gone. So it's a destructive edit, so make sure you really love what you did, or first duplicate that clip so you can always go back to the original. Okay, let's go to Beat Detective.